How's it going, YouTube? We're back with another video. Today, I wanted to go into sensitivity settings with you guys. There's a plethora of them out there. You know, almost every channel eventually has a sensitivities video, and I think it always has a lot of helpful information. However, you know, from console over to PC, I feel like there are some things that can be talked about, and just kind of a lot of the things that I've learned. I've logged about 2,000 hours in on console. I'm currently up 300 hours on PC, and honestly, there's just like a lot you could always learn in terms of consistency and just kind of committing or when you should be changing and things of that nature. So I wanted to go ahead and just jump right into it for you guys. So let's get into it. So first, I'll show you what I'm running. I'm running 4-3 linear in a small dead zone. I'm on a Scuff Pro Instinct controller. I found that to be super useful. It's super comfortable in my hands, and when I was running the Elite Wireless 2 controller, I loved the tension in those sticks, but just durability wise, it held up for a good long while, but it didn't really have that comfort that I was looking for. So for my controller players out there, the original one is good if you play claw. If you have the resources to do so, I definitely recommend at least picking up maybe like an Elite Wireless controller if you can, just because those paddles, which you'll see here when you see my A and B, that's actually me using the paddles. That's not actually me clicking A and B with my fingers. The only time I'm actually probably like hybrid clawing it is when I'm pressing Y. That's when I'm moving RB over to Y to do those things, reload of that nature. But everything else, my meds, my nades are all on my paddles. This minimizes me having to take my hands off. So 4-3 linear, 4-3 classic. That's always, at the end of the day, it's a preference, and I think that's kind of what a lot of people forget. They go into these videos, they take away some tips, they give it a try, they realize they could be overperforming or underperforming, and then they instantly have their view on it. Yes, it all takes time. At the end of the day, regardless of what I push out through this video, you kind of have to find one and stick with it, and I'm just going to kind of go with the pros and cons that I've noticed of ALC versus just kind of default, and going with that. So 4-3 linear and why I like it. So 4-3 linear I think is loose enough that you can, still kind of move around, do what you have to do. And on the linear, it doesn't feel all that stiff. Classic, I'm sure we've all heard Gimberton, but it kind of has like a boxy feel. You kind of always feel like you have a square sense of movement. So with linear, I feel like it's just a little bit more fluid. It's a little bit more comfortable in terms of executing and being able to do things of that nature. So that's kind of what I go with. In terms of just using settings, there's a lot of good comfort in there overall between aim smoothing and not really smoothing. So if I was going to make a suggestion as a starting point, I would always suggest 4-3 linear. Start with 4-3 linear, give it 2 weeks. I say if you were going to play anything, at minimum, try it for 4 days to notice a micro change in positive or negative, rather if you find yourself doing worse or doing more. But if you can commit to 2 weeks, you should see progress in terms of it being one, comfortable, and it being when you're using, or it, dramatically changing your gameplay and it being more negative, right? Because if you try to do it for a day or you do it for 2 hours, you're not going to see anything. You're going to just naturally be bad at it. Because it's not something you're used to. Maybe you've been bouncing around changing ALCs. Maybe you've been on 4-3 classic, 3-3 classic, 4-4 classic. Maybe you've been on a no dead zone. And that's okay. When it comes to no dead zone, that's kind of a preference. For me, let me go ahead and show you, oops, wrong one. Let me go ahead and show you guys no dead zone, right? I have this stick drift. Right, everybody's going to have stick drift. I get it. If your controller has very minimal stick drift, that's fine. However, what I've noticed when it comes to running no dead zone is this, right? Trying to balance it at a ranged target seems like a little bit of a hassle for me. So I'm not naturally going to run a small dead zone because I have to put a lot of focus into balancing out if I'm trying to pick them off, say with like a 30-30, right? You're at range, you're trying to balance it for one shot, and then you take your one shot and you're like, oh man, like I'm really trying to lock that in, but instead you're hitting body shots, right? That's fine if you want that smoothness, but you don't want it to, have that natural feel. Okay, so you put it on small, or maybe switch over to ALC settings, try to get that nice, fast reflex you're looking for, but with that balance. Whereas with linear small, right, I can keep it. I'm not really making any serious adjustments there. Like, yeah, sure, I'm still noticing myself kind of having to adjust, but once I start shooting the gun, it's a lot more stable. You'll see 13 as a body shot, 18 was a critical shot in the middle of the target, but it's a lot easier to balance that way, so it's not all that bad to do. So between no dead zone and small dead zone, you really have to determine that based on how much stick drift you have. This controller is probably only like 4 months old. Stick drift is just naturally going to happen when you're playing a lot of FPS games. You can't really avoid it. Therefore, I will say if you're not going to run ALCs, avoid going with no dead zone unless you're willing to put up with that as something you have to kind of combat. For me, I'm more of a set it and forget it. I need my muscle memory to be focused on things like tracking, trailing, recoil control in general, and things of that sort. So that's kind of where I'm putting my attention into. For ALCs, you can kind of do no dead zone but change the response curve, and I'll get into that, and you can kind of balance it out. Granted, the ALCs I used to run wasn't really like that. I tried to still run some relative dead zone, but as close to null as you can get, right? So 4-3 linear. 4-3 linear overall, I think, provides good stability, right? So that was minimal to no smoothing, right? That's no smoothing at all. Target's probably like 40 meters, you know, out, 20 meters if that, right? And you can trail and adjust kind of smoothly. If the target's a little bit farther out, right, you can do your aim smoothing, right? Aim smoothing is that left and right strafe you need there. And when you're smoothing, you're also paying attention to trailing, right? So targets that are moving left and right like this, you're not focusing on trying to stay centered on target because they're almost always going to outpace you, right? And that's where you need your tracking, but you also need to know how to trail. Most people try to use this synonymously, like they're one and the same, when in fact they're not. So right, you have your tracking, you're tracking the target, but you also need to be able to compensate for trailing, and that's slightly moving ahead of the target because your bullets it's almost, you know, when you're aiming for a long range target, you're not going to shoot directly on target. You got to know how to trail. Now, granted, in my case with no sight on, that's not going to be super easy to do from here, right? But you kind of notice that you have to like aim just a little bit ahead to get them, and that's what kind of separates, you know, high tier players from low tier players, is that a lot of them will try to focus on target and they'll easily kind of get outpaced, and that's where you kind of need to be able to trail. Now obviously there's a lot of other factors into that, right? On controller, there's only so much range between us and a target before we're kind of raw inputting it, right? We're not really having any aim assist help, and that's where your MK players are really going to show out and they're really going to dominate, and that's fine. That's just kind of the risk you have to play. That's the game you're playing. So you have to learn how to trail. And you can see from right there in that moment that when he was sidestepping, of course that time he chooses not to sidestep, right? He slows down and he kind of, it's not even super aggressive, it's just ever so slightly moving back and forth between the two, right? Obviously I didn't work on my tracking, this is why I'm not no master player, right? I'm diamond at best. But it's really nailing that strafe in there, and of course you have to move closer to get them to spawn. So I'm going to move over this way because I can only get a steady spawn of them over here. So I apologize for that, right? But it's getting, you know, smoothing them out, which is what I always recommend, right? Smoothing out allows you to stay on body, but toggle, you know, between trailing or just smoothing. Or not smoothing, but remaining center max, right? So I don't have to really do too much smoothing. I don't have to stray away from the body there because it's all centered. But when they're a strafing target, you can sit there and stand still and try to trail, right? Or in most cases, which I would recommend using 90% of the time, is trying to obviously strafe, right? Strafing with the target. Now, obviously, you don't know what they're thinking all the time. Sometimes they're going to wide strafe, right? Sometimes they're going to macro strafe, so like, right, long strafes like that. You have long strafing like that, then you have micro strafing like that, right? And those are the things you have to predict. And that's where determining your range and when you should stop shooting and keep shooting kind of comes in. And that jumps into my next piece. Knowing when to keep shooting and when to let off, right? Most people have a habit of just kind of like dumping the clip. Regardless if they're missing or not, you're dumping the clip. And now the person who's probably been just out strafing you and not shooting or just taking pop shots at you still has about a clip and a half to use against you, right? So if you know they're strafing you, you get out strafe, you need to get that muscle memory in there, regardless of what you're using for ALCs or regular, and know when to let off. That is what really separates a lot of players in battles, is that if I know you're just spraying at me, I'll just play cover and I'll pop shot you. You know, I'll pop up, you're spraying, I'm going like this, popping up and down, you know, hitting and getting the target. I'm using less of my clip. Now you're already on your secondary weapon, which is probably close range, now trying to close the gap. I'm going to milk the rest of that clip, pull out my secondary, and just take you out. And that kind of goes into another video that I can make in the future if that's something you guys are interested in, and kind of going into those tactics. Now, let me tell you, I'm not no top tier player. I'm not master. I've never even gotten remotely close to hit it. On average, I'm diamond 3, plat 1 if I've even, you know, decided to put the time into rank, because I play this game for fun. I'm not aiming to be top. If I play ranked, it's just out of mere curiosity to see. However, between console and even PC, I've never really landed below plat 1. You know, plat 1, and then I call it a season because it is what it is, depending on how the system goes, and or higher, if I know I'm at least trying to lock in that D3, D2 position, or if I have buddies on D1, cool, and then I kind of bounce around between getting demoted or promoted from there. Happens to the best of us, it really depends. So, now diving into ALCs. Now, as you'll see, I'm not an ALC player at all. These are settings between, you know, reading Reddit, reading forums, watching, you know, pros and just general streamers that run ALCs, even though I think the grand default is 4-3 linear for players, if you want to call that the meta this season. But we do have a lot of ALC players, and there's a lot of pros and cons to that, just to rope that in there, right? Pros of 4-3 classic or 4-3 linear, 4-4 classic linear, 3-3 classic linear. It's a set it and forget it. And that's what you're looking for, right? You need to develop muscle memory and strategy, because at the end of the day, your aim can be as good or as bad as you need it to be. However, what you're not going to really be able to take away from that is the skill of positioning, rotation, and all things of that nature that take into account if your aim is even remotely effective at that point. You don't got to be the best shot, while that would be ideal, but if you can just out position somebody and have decent aim, that'll go a long way, right? So the pros and cons is: pro, you get to set it and forget it. Con, you don't get that adaptability. You don't get those micro adjustments. Maybe, you know, you're noticing, you know, sometimes that you want your ADS setting to be maybe just a hair faster. Maybe you want it to just be able to zoom in, you know, just not really zoom in, but, you know, strafe or look around just a little bit faster. And if you try to do 4-4, you'll notice it's a big jump in the ADS speed there. So that's where you kind of dive into ALCs. Now, what I've noticed, if you go to Reddit, and I will go ahead and drop the link to that screenshot in there for you guys on Reddit, it'll have a general baseline conversion for those default settings that, you know, 4-3, 3-3, 4-4, and it'll convert it into ALCs, and you tweak from there. This is mine, right? This is 4-3 but adjusted, right? I'm running a 2 dead zone, 2 threshold, a 6 response curve, and that dead zone and response curve is really where you're going to want to play with in terms of, you know, how much stick drift you want to be able to put down. Your yaw and speed setting for non-ADS based on how you want your you know, speed and feel to look. Normally I turn everything down to 0 because I want it to be as reactive as possible. Then I have 250 and 200 just because that's the smoothness. I liked it back when I ran it. 150 and 110. 109 is, you know, I'm really trying to get it locked in at 110, but I left it at 109. 150 and adjusting from there. Target and melee compensation off. This is where I got a caveat for my console players. Console players, if you are thinking about switching to PC, I recommend running a default ALC setting or a default classic or linear setting from that Reddit post, converting that into ALC, and then running your target compensation to PC, right? Because for PC, target compensation is aim assist on, aim assist off. On console, it is not aim assist on, aim assist off. It is Xbox aim assist or PC aim assist, and there is about a 0.2 difference in between the two. And you'll notice, because I promise you, if you run PC, your aim will feel way smoother. but you're not getting much assist. So you'll have better overall consistency. However, up close, you are still going to get outgunned by people who are running default settings on console aim assist, right? So you see here, I have, you know, kind of very minimal stick drift. If I kind of leave the stick, it'll leave it. I don't use this setting often, you know, so as you can see, my aim is not super consistent. You know, regardless if I'm moving or not, I am relatively comfortable with it, but I'm definitely not as consistent as I would be. However, I can tell that this feels just a little bit more fluid. It's a little bit more in 4.3. I feel Linear has made my 4.3 setting a little bit smoother than this, because I have this adjusted based off 4.3 Classic, and I can see that my left and right does not feel as smooth as it would on 4.3 Linear, so you would have to adjust that, but that's fine. It's, you know, about abusing the aim assist as much as you can. However, it's still allowing yourself that sense of freedom to make those adjustments. See, I'm just, regardless if I'm up close or far, it just feels off, and really that boils down to comfort. So if you want my baseline there for ALCs to adjust off from, it's dead zone 2, threshold 2, response curve 6, no per optic, 250 yaw, 200 pitch, everything 0, ADS is 150 yaw, 110 pitch, everything off, on and on. And you can go with that and adjust from there. However, if you're going to do that, stick to 1. And that is the overall point. It's just a matter of sticking to 1. Sorry, I thought it was in the ALC menu there. So if, for me, I'm going to make any recommendations, is stick to 4.3 Linear, small, run that for a couple days, and really see how you feel about that. Because regardless of what controller you're using, you might find yourself developing a little bit more comfort for that, right? And that's fine. And then moving on, we got to take into scopes, right? Scopes, you hear it all the time. The CEO himself says you should really kind of stray away from using anything over a 2x, and that's fine. And that's for obvious reasons. You know, depending on up close or up far. Personally, I'm not using a 3x regardless, unless it's on some sort of marksman or longbow or something like that. Just because Call of Duty kind of back in the day when I ran that, well, my aim is off. That's what I get from not warming up. But that's fine, because the intent is to bring it to you guys as raw as I can get. These are on cold hands. It's just, you know, being warming up to it almost that instantly. However, going back to the scopes. 3x, you know, it's too close. You're rather super zoomed in, and if somebody's, you know, within your 20-meter bubble, now you're like super scoped in to not be scoped in, and you're not taking advantage of the aim assist, and that's where M&K players are kind of have that scope, right? Look at that, and that's just taking in the range, taking in the scope, a couple rounds, right? Switching over to the 2x, rinse, repeat. I'm super used to the flatline, so I'm doing the flatline. You know, try it with weapons you're not used to, and that's where all of that's really going to show. You know, running a 3x and trying to hit it close could be a little bit more dramatic than a 1x. However, that 1x isn't going to provide that range, that comfort. So, you know, start with a 1x, go to a 2x, and really find out to see where your consistency is coming in at. Right? And as you saw right there, it happened real quick, but it's that kind of trailing you had to do there. And then let's move on to the 3x, right? Boom. Like, look how much more dramatic that is. Whereas this, right, you're kind of getting the comfort of both worlds. It's not super close. It's not super far. You can kind of bounce back, right? Hit the 3x. Wow, did it really stick that? Okay, that's where it spawns. You know, it's vastly different. And that's going to feel super weird and transition to if you're, like, trying to, like, it up and then switch to 2. Now your aim's kind of readjusting. So stick to a 2x, a 1x, or iron sight, you know, get in and rotate it up that way, right? And that comes into even guns that I don't really use, right? Flatline, no Havoc, no attachments. I almost never use, right? Because it's a pain. So look at that. Even on a 1x, and you know, short to medium range, it's not super horrible to do. As you can see up here, it's almost vastly different. It's slightly farther back. You know, I can't really line up my shot, focus it. However, I am super bad with Havoc. I recommend if you're going to use the Havoc anyway, probably put some time into it. But, you know, that 4.3 is really easy to grasp. That 4.3 linear is quote-unquote meta for a reason. So if you're going to run anything, start with 4-3, use it as a baseline. If it feels a little wonky, convert that into ALCs, dial it in from there, and really kind of make use of that. You know, you want that level of comfort. That way you could set it, forget it, and, you know, work on your other things like, you know, bouncing around into cover, you know, popping in and out of cover, and like, putting into the target there, and just focusing on other things. Because if you're focused on trying to balance out, you know, your stick drift because you're trying to run super low, go full Gin Burton, that's fine, but just know that stuff takes time. The end result of it all is that it takes time. Don't overcommit into one. Don't undercommit into one. You'll know if you're seeing steady progress or not. And that's where a lot of that 4-3 or ALC comes into. A lot of people will try to sell you on ALCs. And honestly, that's fine. Give that a try. Sure. But ALCs are fine-tuned to an individual. 4-3 linear, while sure over time is kind of fine-tuned, but I mean, there's no fine-tuning you can do to it like you can with ALCs. So 4-3 linear, leave it. Give yourself at least 2-3 days, one gaming session at that, just to see if you see a micro improvement. Then adjust from there. Give it 2 days. 2 days turn to 3 days, and then review your clips in like a week and see if you improve. Because I promise you, over time, 4-3 linear feels a lot more viable to play, even at long range, and things of that sort. And that's the type of stuff you can benefit from. And it's super nice. Wow. I was messing with the Prowler because I have yet to touch it. So I'm still kind of getting used to it. The select fire hasn't been in the game for like 6 seasons. So it's however, not having any recoil on that is but yeah. You really can't go wrong with 4-3 linear, so I always kind of stand strong by it and say if people are having a super hard time finding something that works, 2x on the card would never really work. Kind of start with that. Start with that and see how that goes. Because 4-3 linear really is a strong play. If not, convert that into ALCs, dial that in based on what you're looking for, because it's always different. But you really can't go wrong with 4-3. I'm always going to recommend that when people, you know, when I'm kind of locked into my games are going well, and on a rare occasion, it doesn't always happen, you know, somebody's like, oh, you know, are you on mouse and keyboard? Are you running controller? And I'll just be like, you know, I'm on controller, but I'm on 4-3 linear, and I've been playing that since about when I returned to Apex at about season 9. I haven't touched it since. It was 4-3 classic for a while. It was ALCs for half of season 10. But ever since that, it's been 4-3 linear. And that commitment really shows because it allows you to set it and forget it and work on those small things. So all in all, kind of chalking up what I showed you guys, right, is the quick rundown between, you know, smoothing and trailing a target. You know, making sure you're pop shotting. You know, you're not emptying a mag. ALCs, I showed you my ALCs. 4-3 and why I think 4-3 is a strong play there. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys took something away from it. If you liked the video, I'm glad you liked it. Like, follow, subscribe. I'll leave my link down there. I try to stream every weekend for you guys on Friday and Saturday. Shortly on Sundays, I normally stream for about 2 hours on the evening portions of the day. So any likes, any follows are always appreciated. I do this for fun. You know, there's nothing really for me to gain here. So if you took something away from it, I appreciate it. If you dislike the video, that's fine. Thanks for sticking around. Anyway, I'll leave links to my previous videos in there. And I hope you guys enjoyed, and have a good day.